A little while ago, I thought that gravel bikes were just some old shite that somebody made up in 2012 to be able to sell more bikes. But how wrong am I? Turns out that their rise in popularity isn't just about the bikes themselves. There's a much bigger reason why the world and his granny are going batshit crazy for them at the moment. Today I'm going to share with you the big idea behind gravel bikes that no one's really talking about, and why that might actually change your view about them. I'll also be asking the big question on everyone's minds, and that is, are they actually worth the money? About 3 years ago, I went to my local bike shop to buy some inner tubes. And then somehow I walked out of the bike shop without the inner tubes, but with a brand new gravel bike instead. Yep, we've all been there. So why did I buy the bike? Well, I had the money, it looked absolutely fantastic, and yes, I suppose I did get swept up in the hype a little bit. And as I left the shop, I thought to myself, have I made a big mistake here? Do I really need a gravel bike, or have I just spent a load of money on something that I'll never ride? But then I did my first ride on it, and I can tell you that all of those doubts completely disappeared. It was fast, it was comfortable, and it was fun to ride. And I suddenly started dreaming of myself riding off into the sunset on endless gravel tracks with the soundtrack to Lawrence of Arabia playing in the background. Since that ride, I kind of get it. Gravel bikes really are the Swiss Army knives of the cycling world. If you can only afford one bike, or if you've only got room for one bike, then it probably should be a gravel bike. They're comfortable enough and fast enough to ride on the road, and if you've ever found yourself wondering where that random gravel track leads, they're tough enough and robust enough for you to find out right there and then. But yeah, everybody knows that though, don't they? That's basically the sales blurb for every single gravel bike that ever was. But the more I rode mine, the more I started to realise that gravel cycling is more than just the bikes. What images spring to mind when you think of road cycling? For me personally, it's things like super fit, stick thin youngsters in their 20s, it's bike races, it's riding impossibly fast, it's training hard, it's watts, it's PRs, and yes, a dollop of elitism if you're stupid enough or clumsy enough to be a nanosecond slower than they are. But I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. Hell, if I was, blimey, 40 years younger and stick thin, that would probably be me. But for us more mature cyclists, is that an accurate representation of the sort of cycling that we want to do these days? Now, as much as I do enjoy challenging myself and pushing myself to the limits, I also enjoy taking things slightly easier from time to time. And I'm not just talking about the cycling here, I'm also talking about the vibe. In my admittedly somewhat limited experience of gravel cycling so far, it seems to be a lot more relaxed and much more about enjoying the ride and having a mini adventure. It also seems to be about exploring and discovering new places that you could never get to on a road bike. So for example, back in the summer, I rode on a gravel route that once upon a time was literally in my back garden, or rather my mum's back garden. And even though I'd known about it my entire life, I had never set foot on it until that day. It was quite an adventure. I also get the feeling that gravel cycling is far less competitive than road cycling. On the gravel rides that I have done with other people, it's been much more about staying together and enjoying the ride together, rather than seeing who can get to the top of the climb first, or who can beat who in the sprint for the road signs. You only have to turn the telly on these days to see an endless parade of doom and gloom and just how messed up this world can be. Is it any wonder that many people are just utterly disillusioned with the relentless materialism and the constant grind of all the stresses and strains of modern life. I personally often find myself longing for a much simpler time, one without 24/7 notifications or the need to live an Instagram-worthy existence. So it doesn't surprise me when I hear about people that want to unplug, go off-grid and live a much simpler lifestyle, even if it is only for a couple of hours at a time. And this is where I think gravel bikes come in. In their own quiet way, they help people push back against this unhealthy, high-speed world. It allows them to ditch the noise, escape the confines of city life, reconnect with nature, and have experiences that feel genuinely meaningful. Now, don't get me wrong, life is obviously much bigger than cycling, but gravel riding does spotlight something crucial: our desperate need for an escape. In a society drowning in distractions, carving out moments of peace and purpose has never felt more important. Gravel bikes offer us a way to tip the scales, reminding us that sometimes the best way forward is to take the path less travelled. Blimey, that got very heavy very quickly. Back in the 1990s, I lived in France, and my landlady was the very image of French chic. She would spend an absolute fortune on designer clothes and then flounce around like she owned the place, which, to be fair, she did. But then she also had this rather bizarre quirk. She kept what she called a wardrobe diary. Every single item of designer clothing in that wardrobe had its very own dedicated page in the diary. And at the top of that page, she would write down the date she bought it and the eye-wateringly high price she paid for it. And then every time she wore it, she would just jot it down. After a couple of years or so, she would divide the price by the number of times she wore it, thus calculating the return on her investment. Now, she did ask me what I thought of her system, so I lied and said that I was very impressed, but secretly I was impressed and mildly horrified at the same time. My takeaway from this is that the upfront cost for something can sometimes be very misleading. So for example, I paid £800 for my gravel bike, and although my record keeping isn't anywhere near as meticulous as Brigitte's was, I would say that over the 3 years that I've owned that bike, I've ridden it maybe 400 times. So if you do the same calculation, that works out to about £2 a ride, so pretty much a bargain. But what if I only rode that bike, say, 10 times? In that case, the cost per ride jumps to a jaw-dropping £80.
Hey,
but of course there's also a twist. My gravel bike isn't my only bike. If it was, I'd have obviously ridden it many more times, and that cost per ride figure would have been reduced considerably. At the end of the day, only you know how much you're willing to spend and how often you're likely to ride. But if you want my advice, I'd say yeah, go ahead and invest in it, particularly if you're going to use it, and more importantly, if you're going to enjoy riding it. Like the meme says, life is short. Buy the damn bike. I believe that there's always something new to learn to help us enjoy our cycling even more, which is why I've created my free monthly newsletter. If you'd like to sign up, I'll leave a link in the description below. In the meantime though, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.